The archival-class research vessel Eternal Memory drifted silently through the void, its crystalline sensors probing the darkness of unexplored space. First Archivist Vela stood motionless on the observation deck, her iridescent scales shifting colors as she processed the latest readings. In 15,000 cycles of exploration, she had never encountered energy signatures quite like these. Most peculiar, she murmured, manipulating the holographic display with practiced precision. The readings suggested advanced weapons technology, but the patterns were completely foreign to Eternal Memory's vast databases. According to all known records, this sector should be empty save for a few pre-spaceflight civilizations. First Archivist, her second-in-command Tarn, called out, "We're detecting artificial structures in high orbit around the third planet. Numerous vessels as well, but their design principles are unprecedented." Vela glided closer to the main viewport, her crystalline staff clicking softly against the deck. The Archivists had long served as the galaxy's record keepers, documenting the rise and fall of countless civilizations over millennia. They took pride in their thorough understanding of technological progression. Yet here was something that challenged their carefully maintained archives. "Establish contact," she ordered. Standard first contact protocols. Before Tarn could comply, dozens of ships suddenly appeared around the Eternal Memory, emerging from what appeared to be artificially generated spatial distortions. Their designs were brutally functional, angular shapes of dark metal bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. No aesthetic consideration, no attempt at harmony or elegance. Just raw, purposeful engineering. "Human Defense Force vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the HDF Vigilant," a voice transmitted clearly in perfect galactic standard. "You've entered restricted space. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose." Vela's scales rippled in surprise. These humans not only had mastered faster-than-light travel and universal translation, but they had done so without any guidance from the elder races. It should have been impossible. "I am First Archivist Vela aboard the Eternal Memory. We are peaceful researchers, documenting the development of younger species. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We were unaware this sector was claimed. Documented and registered with the Galactic Assembly 3 standard years ago," Captain Chen replied. "Though I note the archivists haven't attended any recent assembly sessions, been too busy documenting developing worlds." The implied criticism was clear. The archivists' role as passive observers had always drawn controversy from more interventionist species, but their mandate was clear: record and preserve knowledge, never interfere. "We maintain strict non-interference protocols," Vela explained. "Our mission is to preserve knowledge for future generations, not to help when younger species face extinction." Chen interrupted. "We know about the Horizon Crisis. Your archives recorded 3 separate species being wiped out by a gamma-ray burst. You knew it was coming. You could have warned them." Vela's scales darkened. "The natural development of species must not be artificially altered. Our archives stretch back millions of cycles. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall. This is the way of things." The way of things. Chen's voice held an edge now. "Humanity faced our own extinction-level events. We survived because we chose to act, to fight, to preserve ourselves and others. Your precious archives show how many species died needlessly while you watched and recorded." Before Vela could respond, new energy signatures began appearing throughout the system. More human ships, emerging from their spatial distortions. But these vessels were different. Massive cylindrical shapes that dwarfed even the Eternal Memory. "Those are our evacuation ships," Chen explained, "currently housing refugees from 3 different systems facing natural disasters. We couldn't just watch and record. We chose to help." Vela moved closer to the viewport, studying the enormous vessels. "You risk contaminating their natural development," she protested, but with less certainty now. "We risk showing compassion," Chen countered. "Your archives preserve the past. We're trying to preserve the future. Every species deserves that chance." More refugee ships continued arriving. Dozens, then hundreds. Each one represented thousands of lives saved through direct intervention, through action rather than observation, through choosing to help rather than simply record. Perhaps, Vela said slowly, her scales shifting to contemplative blues and greens, perhaps our archives are incomplete. There may be alternate perspectives worth documenting. The archival class research vessel Eternal Memory drifted silently through the void, its crystalline sensors probing the darkness of unexplored space. First Archivist Vela stood motionless on the observation deck, her iridescent scales shifting colors as she processed the latest readings. In 15,000 cycles of exploration, she had never encountered energy signatures quite like these. Most peculiar, she murmured, manipulating the holographic display with practiced precision. The readings suggested advanced weapons technology, but the patterns were completely foreign to Eternal Memory's vast databases. According to all known records, this sector should be empty save for a few pre-spaceflight civilizations. First Archivist, her second-in-command Tarn, called out, "We're detecting artificial structures in high orbit around the third planet. Numerous vessels as well, but their design principles are unprecedented." Vela glided closer to the main viewport, her crystalline staff clicking softly against the deck. The archivists had long served as the galaxy's record keepers, documenting the rise and fall of countless civilizations over millennia. They took pride in their thorough understanding of technological progression. Yet here was something that challenged their carefully maintained archives. "Establish contact," she ordered. Standard first contact protocols. Before Tarn could comply, dozens of ships suddenly appeared around the Eternal Memory, emerging from what appeared to be artificially generated spatial distortions. Their designs were brutally functional. Angular shapes of dark metal bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. No aesthetic consideration, no attempt at harmony or elegance. Just raw, purposeful engineering. "Human Defense Force vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the HDF Vigilant." A voice transmitted clearly in perfect galactic standard. "You've entered restricted space. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose." Vela's scales rippled in surprise. These humans not only had mastered faster-than-light travel and universal translation, but they had done so without any guidance from the elder races. It should have been impossible. "I am First Archivist Vela aboard the Eternal Memory. We are peaceful researchers, documenting the development of younger species. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We were unaware this sector was claimed. Documented and registered with the Galactic Assembly 3 standard years ago," Captain Chen replied. "Though I note the archivists haven't attended any recent assembly sessions, been too busy documenting developing worlds." The implied criticism was clear. The archivists' role as passive observers had always drawn controversy from more interventionist theses, but their mandate was clear: record and preserve knowledge, never interfere. "We maintain strict non-interference protocols," Vela explained. "Our mission is to preserve knowledge for future generations, not to help when younger species face extinction." Chen interrupted. "We know about the Horizon Crisis. Your archives recorded 3 separate species being wiped out by a gamma-ray burst. You knew it was coming. You could have warned them." Vela's scales darkened. The natural development of species must not be artificially altered. Our archives stretch back millions of cycles. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall. This is the way of things. The way of things. Chen's voice held an edge now. Humanity faced our own extinction-level events. We survived because we chose to act, to fight, to preserve ourselves and others. Your precious archives show how many species died needlessly while you watched and recorded. Before Vela could respond, new energy signatures began appearing throughout the system. More human ships, emerging from their spatial distortions. But these vessels were different. Massive cylindrical shapes that dwarfed even the Eternal Memory. "Those are our evacuation ships," Chen explained. currently housing refugees from 3 different systems facing natural disasters. We couldn't just watch and record. We chose to help. Vela moved closer to the viewport, studying the enormous vessels. You risk contaminating their natural development, she protested, but with less certainty now. We risk showing compassion, Chen countered. Your archives preserve the past. We're trying to preserve the future. Every species deserves that chance. More refugee ships continued arriving. Dozens, then hundreds. Each one represented thousands of lives saved through direct intervention, through action rather than observation, through choosing to help rather than simply record. Perhaps, Vela said slowly, her scales shifting to contemplative blues and greens, perhaps our archives are incomplete. There may be alternate perspectives worth documenting. We'd be happy to share our records, Chen offered. All the times we chose to act rather than observe. All the civilizations that survived because someone decided their story shouldn't end. Might make for some interesting additions to your archives. As Vela watched the endless stream of rescue ships, each one carrying countless souls saved through direct action, she felt something she hadn't experienced in thousands of cycles. Doubt in the wisdom of pure observation. These humans had achieved in centuries what most species took millennia to develop, and they had done it not through careful isolation, but through active cooperation and intervention. Your offer is appreciated, Captain, Vela replied finally. Perhaps it is time for the archivists to document a new approach to shepherding civilization's growth. Glad to hear it, Chen said, and Vela could hear the smile in her voice. Welcome to human space, First Archivist. We have quite a few stories you might want to add to those archives of yours. The eternal memory hung in space, surrounded by vessels that challenged everything the archivists thought they knew about technological progression and species development. Sometimes, Vela realized, the most important knowledge came not from passive observation, but from being willing to learn from those you thought had nothing to teach. The human ships had taught her that lesson today. She suspected they would teach her many more before this encounter was done. The Grand Archive chamber aboard the Eternal Memory hummed with activity as holographic displays showed the full extent of human technological development. First Archivist Vela's scales shifted through shades of confusion and concern as she studied the data alongside her research team. Impossible, Senior Researcher Karn muttered, his crystalline implants pulsing with agitation. Their development path defies all known models. No species advances this rapidly without guidance. Captain Chen stood calmly at the center of the chamber, watching the archivists struggle with their findings. We had guidance, she said simply. Necessity. Survival. Every challenge we faced forced us to adapt or die. The displays showed humanity's technological progression, from basic spaceflight to FTL travel in less than 3 centuries. But it was the irregular pattern of advancement that disturbed the archivists most. Huge leaps forward during times of crisis, technologies developed out of sequence, solutions that ignored conventional wisdom. Your species skipped entire stages of development, Vela observed, bringing up a comparison with standard progression models. You developed quantum shielding before mastering basic energy containment, artificial gravity before reliable fusion. It's messy, Chen suggested with a slight smile. We didn't have the luxury of following a textbook progression. When you're facing extinction, you work with what you have. A new hologram appeared, showing one of the massive human evacuation ships, the Sanctuary-class vessels. Chen explained. We developed them when we discovered the Hellfire Nebula was expanding faster than predicted. 3 colony worlds in its path. Standard models said we needed at least 50 years to develop the necessary technology for mass evacuation. But the nebula would reach those worlds in 10 years, Karn noted, checking the archive data. So we did it in 8, Chen said matter-of-factly, throughout the conventional approach. Combine technologies in ways your models probably say shouldn't work. But they did work. We saved 12 million people. Vela's scales rippled with distress. The archivists had recorded thousands of similar situations over the millennia. They had documented countless species facing extinction events, carefully noting their responses, their successes, their failures, always observing, never interfering. Your methods are dangerous, she argued, combining technologies without proper understanding of their interactions, ignoring established development sequences. The potential for catastrophic failure is better than guaranteed extinction, Chen interrupted. Yes, we've had failures. Terrible ones, but we learned from them, adapted, improved, and most importantly, we shared what we learned with others. New data scrolled across the displays, records of human interventions across dozens of systems, primitive civilizations saved from natural disasters, pre-spaceflight species given carefully measured technological assistance to survive environmental collapse, young spacefaring races taught to defend themselves against cosmic threats. You're disrupting the natural order, Karn protested. These species should develop at their own pace, face their own challenges, like the Meridians did. Chen's voice was sharp now. Your archives show you watched them develop for 10,000 years, watched them build their first cities, discover electricity, take their first steps into space. And then you watched their sun go nova. 12 billion people, an entire species and their history, gone in an instant. Because no one warned them, no one helped. The chamber fell silent. That particular archive entry had always been difficult for the archivists to review. We followed the protocols, Vela said quietly, but her scales had shifted to colors of uncertainty. Protocols written by whom? Chen asked. And for what purpose? To preserve knowledge. What good is knowledge if it's not used to help others? Before Vela could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Multiple vessels dropping out of FTL, Karn reported. Unknown configuration, energy signatures similar to the Meridians, Chen finished grimly. Before their sun died, they launched seed ships, automated vessels carrying their genetic legacy, their final hope for survival. We found one. Help the AI restore its precious cargo. The new Meridians have been looking for others of their kind, and for answers about why they were left to die. The unknown ships surrounded the eternal memory, their design clearly influenced by ancient Meridian architecture, but enhanced with human engineering principles. A new voice came over the communication system. Eternal memory. This is Director Selen of the new Meridian Conservation Fleet. Our human allies shared their archives with us. We know you watched our ancestors die. We have questions. Vela looked at Chen, who shrugged. Sometimes the price of pure observation is having to face those you chose not to help. The new Meridians aren't here for revenge. They're here to ensure no other species suffers their fate. To turn your precious archives from a record of the dead into a tool for preserving the living. As the new Meridian ships held position around them, Vela realized that humanity had done more than just break the expected patterns of technological development. They had fundamentally challenged the archivists' entire philosophy. Knowledge wasn't meant to be simply preserved. It was meant to be used, shared, applied to save lives and prevent tragedies. Perhaps, she said finally, her scales settling into determined hues, it is time for the archivists to do more than observe. Director Selen, we are prepared to answer your questions, and perhaps to learn some answers of our own. The ancient order of the archivists was about to change, pushed forward by humans who refused to accept inaction in the face of suffering, and by those who had paid the price for that same inaction. The galaxy would never be quite the same, and maybe Vela realized that was exactly what it needed. The emergency session of the Archivist High Council was unprecedented in its chaos. The vast crystalline chamber, normally a place of quiet contemplation, echoed with heated debates. First Archivist Vela stood at the center, her scales maintaining a steady blue of determination, despite the hostility directed at her. You've violated our most sacred protocols. High Archivist Nexus thundered, his ancient form towering over the assembly. 10 million cycles of careful observation. Threatened by this, This reckless alliance with humans and their resurrections. Resurrections. Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tumult. The new Meridians aren't resurrections, they're survivors. No thanks to your protocols. The humans' presence in the sacred chamber was itself controversial, but after the confrontation with the new Meridian fleet, changes were already rippling through the Archivist Order. Our archives show 17 different species who attempted to restore extinct civilizations, another council member argued. All ended in disaster. This is why we observe but never interfere. Your archives are incomplete. A new voice joined the debate. Director Selen of the New Meridians emerged from the shadows, her form a perfect blend of restored Meridian biology and human engineering. You record failures but ignore successes. You document disasters but overlook triumphs. The chamber erupted again, but fell silent as proximity alerts suddenly blared. On the massive display screens, hundreds of ships were dropping out of FTL around the Archivist homeworld. The swarm, someone whispered in horror. They found us. The swarm, a mysterious force that had been destroying isolated worlds on the galaxy's edge. The Archivists had been documenting their attacks, of course, always observing, never interfering. We detected them heading this way, Chen explained calmly. That's why we called this session. You've got about 6 minutes to decide. Stick to your protocols and face them alone, or accept our help. High Archivist Nexus drew himself up. We have defensive capabilities that haven't been tested in 8,000 years, Villa cut in. I've seen the human combat records. I've witnessed new Meridian adaptation technology. The swarm has already destroyed 3 worlds that tried to fight alone. We don't have to be the 4th. The tactical displays showed the swarm ships advancing, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. But now other ships were moving to intercept them. Human battleships, their angular forms bristling with weapons. New Meridian vessels, their living metal hulls already adapting to combat conditions. 4 minutes, Chen announced. We've got a combined fleet ready to engage, but we need access to your archive data on previous swarm attacks, and we need it now. The council chamber erupted in argument again. Protocols versus survival. Tradition versus necessity. Pride versus pragmatism. Enough. Villa's voice carried an authority that silenced the chamber. I have seen what happens when we choose observation over action. The archives exist to preserve knowledge. But knowledge without application is meaningless. I am invoking Emergency Protocol 0. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Protocol 0 hadn't been used in millions of cycles. It gave a first archivist absolute authority in extinction-level events. The archives will be opened, Vela declared. All data on the swarm will be shared with our allies, and the Archivist Defense Fleet will deploy under human tactical command. You can't. Nexus began, but proximity alerts blared again. 2 minutes, Chen said. Choose now. The tactical displays showed the swarm closing in, but they also showed something unprecedented. Human ships moving in perfect formation with new Meridian vessels, their different technologies complementing each other. And now, rising from the Archivist homeworld, ancient defense ships were taking flight, their crystalline forms beautiful and terrible. The archives note that the swarm attacks in predictable patterns, Selen observed, studying the shared data. They've never faced a combined defense before, never had to adapt to multiple technologies simultaneously. Then let's show them something new, Chen smiled grimly. Something worth adding to the archives. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. Human tactical brilliance combined with new Meridian adaptive technology and archivist defensive systems. The swarm, for the first time in recorded history, was driven back. Hours later, as the combined fleet conducted cleanup operations, High Archivist Nexus approached Vila. The protocols, he began, then stopped, his ancient form seeming to shrink slightly. The protocols were written in a different age. Perhaps they should be updated. Vela's scales shifted to colors of hope. Not updated, she corrected gently. Enhanced. We'll maintain our role as knowledge keepers. But now we'll also be knowledge sharers. The archives won't just record history, they'll help shape it. As she watched human engineers working alongside new Meridian adaptation specialists to repair damaged archivist ships, Vela felt a profound sense of rightness. This was evolution in action, not just technological evolution, but cultural evolution. The kind that came from choosing to act, rather than merely observe. The archivists would continue their ancient mission of preserving knowledge. But now they would do so as active participants in galactic civilization, not just its observers. The price of change was high, but the cost of stagnation would have been higher. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in millions of cycles, the archivists would help guide that change rather than simply recording it. The observation deck of the Human Archivist Joint Research Station, Convergence, offered a spectacular view of history in the making. Captain Chen stood beside First Archivist Vela, watching as ships from a dozen different species maneuvered through complex formation exercises. 3 months ago, they wouldn't even talk to each other, Chen remarked. Now look at them. The success against the swarm had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Ancient species that had long isolated themselves were suddenly seeking contact. Younger races that had hidden from more advanced civilizations were emerging, asking for guidance and offering their own unique perspectives. The Quantum Collective finally responded to our invitation, Vela said, her scales shimmering with excitement. They've been in self-imposed isolation for 12,000 cycles, but after reviewing our battle records, they want to know how we merged Meridian adaptive tech with human targeting systems. Chen finished. Can't blame them. Even I didn't think that would work. The station's alert system interrupted their conversation. Priority signal from Deep Space Array 7, the AI announced. Unknown energy signature detected. Pattern matches preliminary swarm indicators. The relaxed atmosphere vanished instantly. Chen and Vela moved to the tactical display, where Director Sillin was already analyzing the data. It's them, the new Meridian confirmed. But something's different. The energy patterns are more complex. They're evolving. Just like we are, Chen said grimly. Call in the fleet. All species, all technologies. Time to see if these exercises paid off. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Ships from civilizations that had never cooperated before moved into formation with practiced precision. Ancient quantum collective vessels, their reality-bending drives precisely calibrated, took position alongside sleek human battleships. New Meridian adaptive cruisers flanked crystalline archivist defenders. The swarm vessels are larger, Vela noted, studying the long-range scans. They've combined their smaller ships into massive battle forms. Fascinating adaptation. They learned from their defeat, Selen agreed. But so have we. Look. The tactical display showed the combined fleet executing a maneuver that would have been impossible 3 months ago. Quantum collective ships created localized space-time distortions, which new Meridian vessels used to seed adaptive defense networks. Human ships launched specially modified drones that the archivists had enhanced with their crystalline technology. Signal from the swarm, the AI announced. Everyone on the command deck froze. In all recorded history, the swarm had never attempted communication. Put it through, Chen ordered. The message was unlike anything they'd encountered. A complex pattern of energy pulses and quantum fluctuations. The archivist's translation matrices worked furiously to decode it. They're curious, Vela said finally, her scales shifting in surprise. They want to know how we merge different technologies. They've never encountered species working together like this. You mean they've never encountered species that could fight back effectively? Chen corrected. Send a response. Tell them we'll share our knowledge, if they're willing to share theirs. The next few hours were tense as the two fleets maintained their positions, exchanging complex bursts of data. The swarm, they learned, was itself a collection of ancient species that had merged into a singular consciousness. They consumed other civilizations not out of malice, but in an attempt to add new perspectives to their collective. They're not destroyers, Selen realized. They're collectors, like the archivists, but more direct. And like us, they've been doing it wrong, Chen added. Show them the results of our cooperation. Show them there's a better way. The standoff ended not with a battle, but with an agreement. The swarm would join the growing alliance, offering their unique perspective on unified consciousness in exchange for learning about cooperative diversity. Their vast organic ships would now join the formation exercises, learning to work with rather than absorb other species. Later, as the combined fleet conducted its first joint exercise with former swarm vessels, Vela turned to Chen. The archives never predicted this, she said. Multiple species, multiple technologies, even multiple philosophies, all working together while maintaining their unique identities. That's because you were recording the past, Chen replied. We're writing the future. And what a future it is, Selen added, watching as a swarm vessel perfectly executed a complicated maneuver in concert with ships that, days ago, would have been its prey. We're all evolution's children, learning to grow together instead of consuming each other. The Convergence Station continued its orbit, a symbol of what was possible when ancient wisdom merged with young innovation, when observation turned to action, and when different paths led to the same destination. A galaxy where diversity meant strength, and cooperation meant survival. The next generation of archivists would have quite a story to record, and for the first time, they would be part of that story, not just its chroniclers. The great amphitheater of the Convergence Coalition headquarters buzzed with activity as representatives from over 100 species gathered for the historic summit. In the 5 years since the first alliance between humans, archivists, and New Meridians, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 50,000 cycles. Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood at the central podium alongside First Archivist Vela and Director Selen. Behind them, a massive viewport showed the combined fleet, an ever-growing collection of vessels representing every possible approach to space travel and technology. The isolation protocols are breaking down across the galaxy, Vela announced, her scales glowing with quiet pride. Species that haven't communicated in millennia are sharing technology, culture, and knowledge. Not everyone's happy about it, Chen added, nodding toward a group of representatives from the conservative collective, species that believed cooperation would lead to cultural contamination. Change isn't easy, especially for those who've spent centuries perfecting their own path. A deep, resonant pulse echoed through the chamber, the swarm representative adding their perspective through quantum vibrations. The translation matrix converted it to standard speech. We once believed absorption was the only way to grow. Now we understand. Growth comes through connection, not consumption. The meeting was interrupted by urgent signals from the outer defense network. The tactical display showed hundreds of ships emerging from FTL, vessels representing isolated species from the galaxy's outer rim, many of whom had rejected all previous attempts at contact. They're charging weapons, Selen reported, but her tone was curious rather than alarmed. No, they're charging something else. The unknown ships arranged themselves in a complex pattern, their combined energy emissions forming what the archivists recognized as an ancient greeting ceremony, one that hadn't been performed in thousands of cycles. They've been watching us, Vela realized, her scales shifting to colors of understanding. Watching how we work together, how we combine our strengths without losing our identities. A transmission reached them, combining multiple communication methods into a single, harmonious message. We come to learn and to teach. The age of isolation is over. What followed was unprecedented. Ships that had never communicated with outsiders now moved in perfect formation with the coalition fleet. Technologies that had developed in isolation for millennia were freely shared and combined in new ways. The conservative collective representatives watched in stunned silence as their worst fears about cooperation were proven wrong, again and again. This is what humanity brought to the galaxy. Vela addressed the assembly. Not just their technology or their tactics, but their understanding that strength comes from unity, not isolation. That wisdom can come from the youngest species, and innovation from the most ancient. The archivists taught us the importance of preserving knowledge. Chen added. The new meridians showed us how to adapt and survive. The swarm revealed the power of shared consciousness. And now, she gestured to the newly arrived ships. Our family grows larger still. The conservative collective's leader, a being of pure energy named Zix, floated forward. We have watched your progress with concern, it admitted. We feared the loss of individual identity, the dilution of pure cultural forms. But what we see here, the energy being pulsed with new colors, this is not dilution. This is evolution. Scylla smiled, her form shifting slightly to better communicate with the energy being. Evolution has always been about adaptation, about taking the best of what works and combining it in new ways. We're not losing our uniqueness. We're sharing it, growing it, making it stronger. The swarm representative pulsed agreement. Many paths, one journey. Many voices, one song. The tactical display suddenly lit up again, but this time with signals from thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Species that had hidden themselves away, civilizations that had barely achieved spaceflight, ancient races that had withdrawn from all contact, all of them reaching out, all of them ready to join the great experiment. The archives will need updating, Vela said, her scales showing joy and wonder in equal measure. We're no longer just recording history. We're shaping it, all of us together. That's what humanity does, Chen said quietly. We don't just survive. We help others survive with us. We don't just learn. We share what we learn. And we don't just grow. We grow together. The great fleet above them continued to expand as more ships arrived. Each one unique, each one bringing its own strength to the whole. The conservative collective ships, after millennia of isolation, moved to join them. The swarm vessels, once feared throughout the galaxy, now served as bridges between different communication methods. And at the heart of it all, human ships flew alongside their allies, their primitive designs now recognized as perfect examples of function-serving form, of practical solutions leading to universal advancement. The galaxy had entered a new age. Not an age of humanity dominating the stars, but an age of humanity showing the stars how to work together. The archives would record this time not as the end of traditional ways, but as the beginning of something greater. A future where diversity meant strength, cooperation meant growth, and no species had to face the darkness alone. As the coalition fleet performed a synchronized maneuver that would have been impossible just years ago, Vela's scales shifted to a color that hadn't been seen in an archivist for millions of cycles, the color of pure optimism. The legacy of the stars would no longer be a record of isolated achievements and lonely advancement. Instead, it would be a story of how different paths led to the same revelation, that the greatest journeys are those we take together.